So this is presentation from nonprofit for affordable housing developer in Marin County that I'll let Carrie talk a little bit more about it, and then they can introduce themselves. First of all, appreciate both of you being here for this presentation and giving us an opportunity to hear some unique alternate ways of thinking for affordable housing. We have some of these informational meetings are set for the next 4 or next 3 commission meetings, and hopefully that to help us to think about different ways that we can do that, and we appreciate you being here for that. And Carrie, if you want to add anything to that.
Thank you, Chair Fernandez. That was a great introduction. We have 2, I believe at least 2 members, Mary Ann Lim from EAH and Scott Johnson, the Director of Business Development, here to present tonight. And I think I will let them step right in. And thank you very much. And if you have any other members of your team that are here this evening, it'd be if you can introduce them as well.
It's just the 2 of us.
Great.
Yes, thank you, Chair Fernandez and members of the commission. My name is Scott Johnson, Director of Business Development. Just technically inept person here. So would I be, to present, to share the presentation, I'm sharing screen? Is that what I'm doing?
That's correct. And if you don't already have permission, we can make you a co-host. Sam, if you can do that.
I think so they said they were going to make us co-hosts.
Yeah. So all you need to do is click the green share screen at the bottom of your Zoom window, and it will give you whatever open windows you have to choose, and you can just select the one that has the presentation on it.
Okay, thank you. The message coming back is host disabled participant screen sharing.
All right, and Sam, I am going to look to you to see if you can, since it's not showing up for me, if you can.
Yeah, try it now.
Okay.
There we go. Nice.
Great. I was going to say, otherwise, I do have it as a backup for that very reason.
We'll try it. Let me get into full screen mode. Okay. Well, yes, thank you. Again, my name is Scott Johnson, EAH's Director of Business Development and a 30-year resident of Sebastopol, during which time I've engaged in the development of a fair number of affordable housing initiatives and communities throughout Sonoma County, including a few right here in Sebastopol. Sharing the presentation with me today is Mary Ann Lim, EAH's Director of Portfolio and Portfolio Finance and Policy. And Mary Ann also has deep roots in Sonoma County through her prior leadership role within Burbank Housing. Our presentation will provide a brief overview of EAH and the what, why, where, and how of our work. And then Mary Ann and I welcome the Q&A and the dialogue that will follow. So 53 years ago, communities were mobilizing across the country to demand fair housing, social justice, economic equality, and EAH's origins in Marin County grow out of that activism. Fast forward 53 years and, gosh darn it, the struggle to create fair and equitable communities which are inclusive to all, regardless of race or economic status. That struggle continues, and that's where we, EAH, place our work. And to push that effort forward in California, throughout the country, within the affordable housing space, public-private partnership is the foundational core for originating, developing, and managing permanently affordable housing. Let me repeat that. Public-private partnership is the foundational core. From our very modest origins in Marin County, some 50 years back, We've grown a wee bit and now have significant capacity and depth that we share with a wide number of community partners across a two-state region, all of California and the islands of Hawaii. I'll share that throughout the North Bay, within Marin, Sonoma, and Napa counties, EAH has developed and manages 40 rental properties, totaling approximately 2,100 deed-restricted homes. And in Sonoma County itself, we own and manage 3 communities, Kings Valley Senior Apartments in Cloverdale, Riverfield Family Homes in Healdsburg, and Sonoma Creekside Family Apartments in Santa Rosa. We advance our work through 3 fully integrated divisions. On the real estate development side, EAH is known for finding creative solutions to complex challenges. Our property and asset management oversight is phenomenal, in large part due to EAH's strong support for its on-site property staff, property management staff, and the residents that they serve. And service is at the core of our mission, where we collaborate with our community partners through our Stay Well program, which is designed to help residents attain and maintain stable housing and to live independently. Now I'll turn it over to Marianne, who will present a few slides that follow.
So the households we usually serve fall within the extremely low income, very low income, and low income ranges, which is from 0 to 80% of the area median income. So, levels of affordability and how much a household pays in rent varies depending on the targeted population and funding sources. Some affordable housing mechanisms you might be familiar with is, public housing, where a household could earn up to 80% of the area median income, and they pay 30% of their income towards rent. And the remainder of the rent is subsidized by HUD. In Section 8 housing, a tenant may have a voucher from a housing authority to obtain housing on the open market, and they also only pay 30% of their income towards rent, but utilization of vouchers in high rent areas is a challenge, such as in Sonoma County, and they're hard to obtain, hard to get the vouchers. Low-income housing, tax credit housing, the property is financed using tax credit, using a tax credit allocation from the state, which allows private investors to put equity into a project in exchange for tax write-offs for losses and depreciation. And there, the tenant pays rent at the level of affordability of their unit. So it's not completely tied to their income. They have to income qualify, but they're paying the rent based on the affordability of the unit. And then there's also permanent supportive housing, which is housing for special needs and homeless or people at risk of homelessness. And usually those renters are extremely low income or have no income and may come with rental subsidies through other programs. So this slide shows, in Sonoma County, this is the multi-family housing program income limits for the state. And in Sonoma County, a person at 50% AMI, a 4-person household would have annual income of about $57,000. Go ahead to the next slide, Scott.
Mm-hmm.
This slide shows restricted rent levels can differ depending on the funding source used to finance the affordable housing. So at the top here, you can see that the HUD 2021 fair market rents, they estimate a 2-bedroom on the fair market is about $19.96 a month. But the state multifamily housing program, which is used to fund a lot of California new developments these days, in Sonoma County, you could see a 2-bedroom for a 50% AMI family is set restricted at $1,278. That's a $718 reduction from HUD's FMRs or difference. Based on these rent tiers, 20% up to 60% AMI, EAH rental units that we are producing average between 40 to 50% AMI. So you can see in those two bands, the rent levels that, area median income, I'm sorry. So 100% AMI. Scott, can you go back to the previous slide just for a second?
Yep.
So you could see here at 100% AMI, that's what the average household income would be. And at 50% for a family of 4, it's 56,800. So you could get an idea of what somebody living in our housing would possibly make. Okay, Scott, go ahead and go forward. And you go forward one more. So this is from an affordable housing needs report on Sonoma County that California Housing Partnership put together. And using 2018 to 2019 data, they estimated that there are almost 17,000 low-income renter households in Sonoma County that don't have access to an affordable home. And 77% of extremely low-income households are paying more than half of their income on housing costs. Renters in Sonoma County need to earn 2.3 times the city of Petaluma minimum wage of $15 an hour in order to afford the average monthly asking rent. And, of course, this was based on 2018-19 data. So I think rents have also gone up since then. Go ahead. So that translates to renters needing to make $34.31 an hour in order to afford the average 2-bedroom asking rent in Sonoma County. And you can see from this chart the types of jobs that make approximately $15 an hour wage. Like I said, that's the city of Petaluma's minimum wage. It's also very close to what a personal care aide might make, farm workers, janitors, cleaners, or retail persons. Even a construction labor with a higher wage of $24 an hour doesn't make enough to afford the average asking rent of a 2-bedroom. Go on. Scott, were you going to talk about this one or?
No, if you can.
Sure. Okay, so funding for affordable housing is extremely competitive in California. And as many of you know, in 2012, we lost redevelopment housing or redevelopment financing, which brought a lot of local funding to affordable housing. And that has made it very difficult for Sonoma County to compete for state financing. In low-income housing tax credit structured financing, due to key rating and ranking criteria, they currently put an emphasis on local funding participation as one of the scoring criteria. And it's really made it hard for projects in Sonoma County to compete. Go on.
So thank you, Marianne. The financing stack puzzle, square peg in a round hole, sums it up perfectly. End of story. Let me just say that in my review of the financing stack puzzle, I'll be repeating and re-emphasizing some of the points that Marianne made. But first, to be clear, affordable housing has development costs that are equal to, sometimes greater than, market rate housing. We're typically on an even playing field with market rate housing when it comes to the cost of land, of professional consultants and their services, of municipal impact fees and permit fees, of insurance, construction materials, etc. Labor typically is costlier for affordable housing because we pay prevailing wages mandated by the state and the feds. In other words, a living wage, which is not typically a requirement of unrestricted market rate housing. So how the heck do we finance multi-million-dollar projects that cost the same, if not more than market rate to build? And how do we do so while providing restricted rents that only support a modest mortgage loan? The answer, it requires a financing stack combining multiple sources of equity and deferred payment debt, typically anywhere from 5 to a greater number of sources, different sources. And the essential ingredient to that financing stack, that stew that we have to pull together, is the investor equity that is generated through the sale of those low-income housing tax credits that Mary Ann was referring to. The tax credit program is the bedrock for most of the multifamily affordable housing developed and sustained across the country. And the basic project eligibility criteria for that program is that it must be non-transient rental housing. In other words, permanent affordable housing. Number 2, that future resident household incomes cannot be greater than the 80% of average median income for that locality that Mary Ann walked us through. And number 3, that project that a tax credit program finances has to be either a new construction or a substantial rehab project. But as Mary Ann aptly put it, in California especially, it is a highly competitive program, and a project has to meet, very many prescribed thresholds to earn a tax credit award. 2 of the various thresholds, which are absolutely essential, are: number 1, a project needs to demonstrate that it has financial support from the local municipality where the project is located. In other words, municipal skin in the game. Number 2, a project has to be quote unquote shovel ready. What does that mean? It means that all planning and environmental clearances must be fully in hand, and that all of the financing other than the tax credit equity must be fully committed. So when EAH steps into a potential public-private partnership opportunity, there are basically four key questions that we ask ourselves when evaluating that public-private partnership housing opportunity. First, does the public jurisdiction have housing resources available? This could take the form, obviously, of a funding contribution towards that capital stack that we've just reviewed, but could also be an investment of city-owned land, the value of city-owned land invested into a project, or indirectly a waiver of municipal impact fees or permit costs. Sometimes, often, all of the above. Second, is there a predictable path to planning approval? In other words, does the zoning for the parcel support a residential multifamily development at the scope and the scale and the density necessary for a feasible, affordable project? Factor number three, has the municipality taken proactive steps to bake into its zoning code definitive means for streamlining, for fast tracking, for providing incentives to affordable housing? That is, does the code provide for multifamily housing as a by right allowable use, or does it require a costly and lengthy process that is subject to future discretionary action as a precondition to that multifamily use? 4, Does the municipality have a record of supporting affordability and supporting integration into its community? And does it have that demonstrated political will to push back against no growth and no housing pressures? Let me now, what I'd like to do is to share very quickly, share two profiles of a couple pipeline projects that we have underway, where we answered yes to each of those four questions that I just posed. The first is in Emeryville, where we are moving forward with a 68 unit project, which integrates seniors and transitional age youth into an intergenerational residential community. And it's being leveraged through a land donation from the city of Emeryville of a city-owned surface lot, along with an early front-end commitment of municipal housing funds towards the project, and a willingness to streamline municipal approvals through non-discretionary by right action. Very important, great development. The second case study here, real quickly, is in the city of Sacramento, where to originate this opportunity, it required a many $1 million raw land purchase, but we took that land purchase risk in part due to the city's very forward-looking zoning ordinance, which allows for ministerial staff level by right planning approval. In this case, we obtained planning and environmental approvals within 4 months of planning application. Within 4 months of planning application, planning approvals, CEQA certification for a 5-story mixed-use affordable housing project containing 140 deed-restricted apartments. In parallel to that planning approval, in 4 months, we obtained a critically important commitment of local housing funds that has allowed us to begin building the necessary financing stack that we previously reviewed. So, last slide. Wanted to close with this slide and a depiction of the 4 deed-restricted rental communities currently existing in the city of Sebastopol, each generally around the perimeter of town and outside of the town core. The last of which, Petaluma Avenue Homes, was completed 12 years ago in 2009. Let me repeat, the last multifamily deed-restricted project completed in Sebastopol 12 years ago, 2009. Our challenge to you is that you take another fresh look at the housing resources that the city controls, which very frankly are not on the cash resources front, but which instead are very much on the land asset front. And specifically, I'm referring to the various surface parking lots within the town core that the city owns. And I'm suggesting that you consider re-looking at a reprogramming and looking at taking advantage of those land assets to leverage new production of affordable housing within your and within my town. And at that is the end of our formal presentation, and Marianne and I look very much forward to dialoguing with you and the public, if that's appropriate.
Great. Thank you, Scott and Marianne. At this point, before we do go into public comment and ask any commissioners that may have some questions to start with. And so there's only 5 of us. You can go ahead and speak up if you have a question.
So I have some questions. I wonder if you could talk a little bit more, just to explain the kind of tax credit competitiveness and how you sort of alluded a little bit to the, needing kind of points, but I'm just wondering if you could talk a little bit more about that and how you really need like maximum points and the importance of the local buy-in, how critical that is to the tax credit process and then getting those awards, since they are so competitive?
Marianne, you want to take that one on, or you want me to jump in?
Sure. I think, there's 9% and 4% tax credits, and 4% tax credits use tax exempt bonds. And in California, for the past 20 years, we've always had more volume bond cap than needs. This last year, it went competitive and it was oversubscribed, I think 3-1. So, we're all scrambling to try to figure out how to get our projects financed. And one of the criteria, they're really looking for new production of housing, not just re-syndication or rehab of existing housing, though that is important because you don't want your existing affordable housing stock to go down from not being recapitalized. So they're looking for new production, but they're also looking at how much the local entity is putting in. So that would be the city, town, or county, as compared to other state dollars. They want to make sure that the locality is putting in their fair share. And then they're also looking at cost efficiency. How much tax credits are you asking for compared to the overall total development cost? And if there's more local money put into it, then it makes your score better because, less of the total development cost is coming from credits or bonds. And, there's a wide variety of things that we have to do. We have to be energy efficient. We have to exceed Title 24. We have to provide services. So it is expensive, but the tax credit project is affordable for 55 years. And so, you want to make sure that you're building a quality project.
And yes, everything Marianne said, plus, one of the key thresholds, Commissioner Fritz, is within the tax credit program is, locational efficiency. And there's strict criteria by which the state evaluates the locational efficiency of a project that they invest in. And so what we're talking about are projects that they invest in need to be in walking distance to designated amenities, schools, senior centers, transit, grocery, food sources, libraries, etc.
Parks, pharmacies, yeah.
Parks, pharmacies, medical centers. So you have to, projects need to be in the city of Sebastopol. If the city is really interested in moving forward with an affordable, permanently affordable multifamily development that is modeled on a tax credit basis, the downtown core is where it's at, man. So there you have it. But Marianne's point about local leverage is very key.
Thanks. I also wanted to hear you maybe talk a little bit more about the importance of the, because you mentioned the importance of having all the entitlements and everything in hand and being able to show basically permit ready kind of projects, and how you mentioned that Sacramento project where you got your entitlements and your environmental documents, everything certified in 4 months, which is miraculous. Can you just talk about when it takes 4 years instead of 4 months to get a project through that process, what does that mean in terms of the project cost and financing?
Oh my God, it means everything. I mean, first of all, there's the assurance, right, that there's a predictable process, right, in place that one can follow, that is based on objective standard, right? But nonetheless, it's prescribed within the zoning code that if you meet this criteria, we have determined as a municipality that this is a public policy priority of ours to support affordable housing. And therefore, we will, on a staff level basis, ministerial basis, we will fast track and streamline your proposal through the approval process and through the CEQA process. You know, we're going to work with you to obtain, you know, CEQA exemption if you're eligible for that CEQA exemption. So there's a firm commitment that isn't just verbal. We hear a lot about, you know, verbal support for affordable housing, but this is operational, actionable, right? Municipal, actionable guidelines, ordinances, policy that the city of Sacramento has very clearly made that commitment, and they're following up on it in a real way. For us as community builders and affordable housing developers and managers, I mean, you know, shortening that shovel-ready timeframe on the land use approvals from, as you say, you know, sometimes 2, 3, 4 years of very expensive pre-development work, shortening that down in a predictable way to something like 4, 5, 6 months is huge. I mean, it's huge. So I'm being emphatic in my response to you, Mr. Commissioner Fritz, but it really is, it's huge.
And if your project isn't shovel ready, you can't compete for the tax credits.
Yeah.
You need maximum points in order to even get to the tiebreaker. I did a project when I was at Burbank in Napa, and I started working on it in March, and we had a tax credit application, a 9% tax credit application submitted by June, and we're lucky enough to get an allocation. But the only way that was possible was the city staff said that they felt that they had a mandate from the council that affordable housing was important. And, you know, before, from March until June, I had to get entitlements. And in Napa, all of the departments, because they felt the project was important, all of the departments, you know, housing, building, public works, fire, they all sat in a room with us and went over the drawings. We hatched out all the problems. You know, one department said, this doesn't work for us. But if you did X, Y, Z, those, you know, that might work. And then the other departments, rather than going back and forth over multiple months between the departments, they were all at the table providing solutions. And that's how we made it happen.
Likewise, Sacramento, same process.
Yeah. And I have to say that project, right after we got our allocation, the Tubbs fire happened. That was in 2017. And after the fire, I had a $2.5 million gap because the cost of construction increased. And, you know, luckily, you know, we were working closely with the city and county, and, you know, they put a little bit more money in. We were able to get money from Tipping Point Foundation, as well as, you know, a private donor, just because, you know, affordable housing was so hard. But, you know, if we had waited another year to try to get that gap financing, it would have cost more than $2.5 million, I believe. So.
Thanks.
Scott, there is a question about looking at modular. Do you want to talk about the
Oh, we
projects that
haven't
were,
seen that down here,
yeah.
don't we? Oh, look at that. Yes, modular. A lot of a lot of excitement around modular. A growing infrastructure base for the production and the supply chain of modular. New factories are opening up, and as I say, lots of excitement. The jury is still out.
And Steve, I think you pushed a button. I think you.
Sorry about that. I was on
Okay,
mute. Hey, look at that. I'm not sure where you just saw my flapping lips and no audio, but what I was saying is that yeah, lots of excitement around modular, new factories opening up, supply chain starting to to produce that supply of modules. And up till this point in time, the real cost savings with modular housing have come in the reduction of time frame, right? Production to start of construction to completion. Sort of back of the envelope, it appears that if all things go as planned, right? If the sequencing plan goes as planned, that you can realistically shave 3 to 4 months off of the construction timeframe. So it gets potentially, if you're doing it right, units in the ground more speedily. So less time frame, paying not as much on construction interest costs, and we, for example, we are looking at it, and the case study in Emeryville, that single graphic of the 4-story structure in Emeryville is one that combines a mass timber on the on the ground floor, right? Beautiful mass timber that would otherwise be a concrete, a base, and the residential above, the 4 stories of residential above, has been intentionally designed to be consistent with and compliant with modular factory-built design standards. So we have the flexibility to go either with modular when we get to an actual construction close, to actually go with modular or conventional stick frame site built.
some of the impediments though to modular is that most of the modular builders are out of state. And so when you have your boxes built, you have to pay for them up front. And then you're transporting them, say from Idaho or farther, and you own them from the moment they leave that factory. So you're taking the transportation risk. You're taking the risk that, it's not going to rain during transportation and that you have enough staging area to stack the boxes. It's not easy. We do currently have a local factory in Factory OS on Mare Island, but that one factory is not big enough to handle the volume we need for California. So
our first factory built community is an ag worker, farm worker development in Greenfield that again has been designed to modular standard. We have construction bids that we've received from various factories, and I anticipate that we'll be seeing a crane up in the air when that project moves into construction here shortly.
And I see the question about, the need for thousands of units in Sonoma County. Because of the limited tax credit allocation, Sonoma is limited to, I think, only, they're in a region where they're getting what is it, 17% of the state's allocation. And there would never be enough tax credits to reach 1,000 units, and you're competing with other counties. I think there's like 5 or 6 other counties in the North region that Sonoma County is in. So it's extremely competitive.
So Scott, you had mentioned that the last affordable housing, deed restricted affordable housing rental project in Sebastopol was built in 2009. Why is that?
Oh my goodness.
Redevelopment died.
Although
2012.
I know
Yeah.
redevelopment is one piece of it, but I think, you know, yeah, that's certainly one piece of why Sebastopol doesn't have the resources. I guess maybe part of that, I mean, a second question or a second part of that is, you know, for other, what kind of things have you seen other small jurisdictions like Sebastopol do to be able to, you know, provide, you know, their fair share, their contribution to, you know, develop affordable housing?
Yeah, great question, Chairman Fritz. You know, as a Sebastopol resident, I'm dying to just dive into that question. Why has my town not supported since 2009? And you know, that's a long answer, I believe. You know, some of the things that other you know, small towns throughout California have done or doing is, quite frankly, you know, aligning their you know, their ordinances, their housing policy, their city council priority goals around housing, and then linking up regionally with you know, be it at the county level, be it at the regional level, ABAG level, but really taking proactive steps to help leverage, right, a welcoming of affordable housing developers like EAH and the rest of the broad network of community builders that we have in the Bay Area. There has to be a welcoming environment, number one. And again, I'm taking off my EAH hat. I'm putting on my Sebastopol resident hat now. You know, over the 30 years that I've lived in Sebastopol, again, I took part in one of the 4 multifamily developments when I was with Burbank Housing, as Marianne was as well, many years back. But you know, Sebastopol, I must say, within the development community, Sebastopol has a particular reputation for not necessarily being all that welcoming to development. And so to go straight to an answer, Chairman Fritz, I think the historical precedent in Sebastopol is part of the contributing factor to no multifamily being developed in Sebastopol for the last 12 years. Many other, you know, there are other variables that come into play, but that certainly is one of them. Okay, I'll put my
and Scott and everyone, I will just, I do need to speak up. The city did buy Park Village Mobile Home Park.
Yes.
And has actually been putting significant resource in there. We are currently renovating 2, what'll be 2 2-bedroom family units, which will be deed restricted, as well as adding 2 RV sites for formerly homeless folks who are living in their RVs. So, and we've actually been working with West County Community Services to transition as homeowners leave to make those units affordable. So I would count that, even though it's I would call it an innovative, and I've actually given a presentation for the American Planning Association on it. It's sort of an innovative approach. It's not a, you know, cookie cutter multifamily rental development, but it is a piece to the puzzle. So if you can add that to your map, Scott.
Oh, yes, I will. Good call out. Yes, we definitely will. We didn't mean to negate that very important contribution that the city has brought forward.
Yeah, and you know, I will say, when I say redevelopment died, I worked for the city of Oakland back when I was a grad student at Berkeley, and worked on redevelopment studies and in the housing and policy section there. And it was, yes, it was very different atmosphere in terms of what you could do locally, and as a local jurisdiction have control. It is extremely difficult for a town or a town our size to develop affordable housing all on its own, other than these, in a small incremental way. We also have an inclusionary zoning requirement, which requires developers to build them on site. So rather than pay a big fee, which would give us more money in the bank, but it's never enough to build the actual units. To get the units on the ground is actually where the city has gone with our policy in that regard. So like the Barlow Crossing townhomes will have 2 moderate income units out of those 18 units. And so it provides for a mixed unit community. And that's a religion and a philosophy is one piece of the puzzle. So to speak, that helps things along. But yeah, the Park Village is sort of more of an innovative way. We certainly wish we had more funding to be able to guide and have more control.
Yes. But, again, the point that I was trying to make is that it doesn't always just necessarily require cash funding resource. And again, lots of municipalities are bringing land forward. So city publicly owned land forward. There's a lot of work that's being done, including by EAH, with communities of faith. So churches, synagogues, who, because of either declining membership or mission-driven desire to support a particular outcome. There's a lot of work within the faith community, and there's a particular parcel in the city of Sebastopol that is owned by a particular church that is a prime parcel that it would be lovely to see the city take and I'm sure the city already has and staff already has, but that's an example of, my gosh, as a developer, that's a great opportunity site. As our city parking.
Scott, I suspect it's the same parcel I look at when I drive by.
I suspect so.
I think there's several faith parcels in Sebastopol that could fit the bill. Personally, I don't think there's just one.
Right.
Can you talk a little bit about sort of the economies of scale for like project sizes? Because I know that becomes an issue with developers of like, you have a lot that you can only get 15 units on. Why is that not attractive?
Right. Yeah, I'm happy to take that and Marianne jump on in, but sort of back of the envelope for EAH, a project typically will need to be in the range of 40 units. Our sweet spot in terms of yield, in terms of number of units, our sweet spot tends to be in the 80 to 120 unit range. That's the sweet spot from a financing standpoint, and being able to assemble that financing stack that we very quickly reviewed. That's kind of the sweet spot. But a lot of smaller projects certainly are possible, and that would be something that the city might be wanting to take a closer look at. 40 to 50. And that becomes a real economic driver, not just on the front end development side in terms of economies of scale, but perhaps even more importantly on the back end operational side. In terms of being able to carry the freight and cover the costs with those very restricted rents, right? A larger scale project is going to be able to cover operating costs much more efficiently than a smaller one. But 40 to 50 to 60 is certainly doable.
It's also harder to attract a tax credit investor on a small project. I mean, just think about a 10-unit project, you know, how you're basically telling the investor that over the next 15 years, when you're in the compliance period and they're in the deal, that they won't have to put in any more money. But, you know, a 10-unit project, if some major building system goes bad, and, you know, you only are putting even $600 per unit a month away, a year away towards replacement reserves, you're never going to be able to, you know, replace a major boiler, or, you know, replace the roof, or even painting. Now a complex could be, you know, $100,000 to $300,000 depending on the size of it. So, you know, that's why having more units makes it more feasible.
Chair, if there aren't, sorry, if there aren't any other questions from the commissioners, do we want to make sure
Paul,
we
did you have
open
any
for
other
public
questions?
comment?
Any other commissioners? I do have a couple of questions that no one else does. Go ahead, Kathy. Yeah.
I was wondering if you'd looked at some of the properties in Sebastopol that are the space over shopping centers. Like there's a couple of, not very many in town, I would admit, but looking at rebuilding some of those facilities that are perhaps empty or underutilized and building over them. Is that just too complicated a relationship for your formula?
You know, no, not complicated from a a design programming standpoint. That definitely is we do that. It really comes down to financial capacity and the economics of the deal. What is the shopping center at the western edge of town? The Redwood Market? Is it?
That's what I was thinking of in particular because of the
Yes.
places.
Right, Redwood Market. You know, there are some easement and long-term lease, you know, issues I think that complicate that particular parcel and its feasibility. But no, the notion, and again, you know, within EAH's pipeline, we're working on deals of this nature. You know, taking on and adding value and redesigning, reprogramming what in effect are surface parking lots. You know, that's what we're looking at with a building or two, right? Single story, you know, strip mall-y type building. You know, adding value to that underutilized real estate asset is definitely something that we look to do. In Sebastopol, you know, that where there isn't a level of public funding available to support that work, it becomes a little bit more complicating. So.
Yeah, and Scott, on that, I do want to let the commission know, and also you guys and anyone else who's working on affordable housing, and that is, I sit on the Sonoma County Community Development Commission Cities and Towns Advisory Committee, and there is more and more funding coming to that group that the Board of Supervisors is awarding. It is, you know, that is a JPA between the smaller towns, so not Petaluma and Santa Rosa. And there's been significant funding in recent years to allocate towards these types of projects. Specifically, there's, you know, community development block grant funding. There's some related to the disaster assistance. So it's, you know, it's based on a formula of from the Tubbs fire and whatnot, where countywide, it doesn't need to be in area, you know, burn areas. It can be throughout the county.
Mm-hmm.
And so there are additional opportunities. Additionally, most of the CDBG funding that the cities usually used to spend on ADA improvements and things like that, we still do, but we can also look at other opportunities like, you know, like Kirk Village is actually, that's the last time we got an allocation from them. It was for those apartments renovations and those types of things. So there are definitely ways that the city can work with and look and support going after those larger fundings that aren't just the tax credit stuff as well.
And Kathy, I wanted to jump in on that Redwood Marketplace question, because I actually was working with a developer who owns that property on kind of a housing idea, but unfortunately the former CVS space is a separate parcel. It's actually owned by CVS, and they are not really a willing seller. I mean, they're willing to sell for just an exorbitantly absurd amount of money, and it's
And they weren't
unfortunately
interested
just
they weren't interested in housing downtown either.
they weren't interested in housing downtown. They're not interested in selling that property, really. It's you know, it's better for them to keep it on their books as like a write-off, basically, and to sell it at a reasonable price for someone to do something with. So while the owner of the whole marketplace owns the parking lot in front of it, you know, they don't own the CVS building itself, so they can't really, unfortunately, do anything with it.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I had another question about whether in any of your projects that you've worked on, you have restrictions for the number of vehicles that units can have as part of their rental. Because when a lot of people look at the numbers you're talking about, 80 to what was that, 140, 50, they think of those cars multiplied by 2 and sometimes 3, because if you have a third bedroom, sometimes you have as many as 6 individuals living in those 3 bedrooms, and they have 6 cars. And that's one of the problems, that takes a lot more space for cars, that makes neighborhoods complain so much about larger developments. We also have, as you know, the bottleneck in town. So I was wondering whether, since not owning a car makes home ownership more affordable, or rent more affordable, because you have less automobile expenses, you still have transportation expenses, and we don't really have, we have a jitney that goes around town about every 45 minutes, and then we've got a few buses that go to other areas, but unless people are really working locally, it becomes a major problem. Other than, you know, Sacramento, Emeryville, these places have freeways, and they're much more suburban in their nature. It's very difficult because our downtown doesn't have that transportation resource. It doesn't have the volume of jobs for those numbers of people to effectively reduce our carbon footprint and have them live here. So it's really important that there's a nexus between, as we grow, the numbers of jobs we have and knowing how many of those people actually work in our town, and working toward making those relationships more coordinated for the future and for the quality of people's lives. So I know that adds another level to your work, but it also helps our town accomplish more of what we want to accomplish going forward in the future, is to reduce that requirement that everyone has to drive to Santa Rosa or to some other area. And I think that's why those larger projects are harder to envision, all of those people having a large percentage of them going out of town, versus a smaller development where you can control how many cars there are and whether people will be working in town, because we have jobs for them at their income level. Do you ever work with that within your communities? Do you look at what jobs are available and what that income is to make sure there's a match there?
Absolutely. Yes. You know, in terms of the market assessment, the needs assessment, we definitely look at those metrics. You know, a lot of the projects that we have moving forward are projects that are consistent with greenhouse gas reducing objectives that I know the city of Sebastopol has articulated and carries forward, but that are, I mean, there is one of the funding programs that comprises that financing stack as a potential funding source is the Affordable Housing and Sustainable Communities funding program, which is intended to reward residential developments that are within walking distance proximate to public transit facilities, and which are building out at maximum densities, right? To bring residents into the town core of whatever city we're talking about, where services are available, where those who live there can walk, within, typically it's a half-mile radius is the radius that that the planners have drawn as the efficient proximity housing to transit. Those folks are walking to transit to hopefully get to jobs, to get to their medical services, or they're walking to their medical services. But in Sebastopol, traffic is an issue. Sebastopol, unfortunately, Sonoma County, West County, with its current transit services, is going to be difficult to get people out of their cars.
They don't run every 15 minutes, which is what you expect. in
Right.
the environment.
No,
And
that's,
that also makes it hard to compete for the tax credits.
Yeah,
yep,
it does. I can
Yeah.
understand that because
Yep.
it's a problem if you move here and you have one car. You have to live within a mile of town and be willing to walk, which we did, by the way, but we realized there were no buses here when we moved.
yeah.
Can I ask a little bit of a follow-up question to that? Does EAH, have you ever gone through the Green Trip certification process? Do you have any Green Trip certified projects? Are you familiar with that?
I am familiar with that. I'm not sure we have a project that's actually formally gone through the Green Trip certification.
I know that they have, it's a program where you get certified, but to reduce your kind of parking counts, and they encourage things like transit passes for residents
Mhm.
or car share programs for residents and things like that to try to get people to,
Yeah.
reduce their car ownership. Just
Right.
want to be any experience with that, those kinds of things.
Well, as certainly we have experience with the end result of what you're describing. I don't think, however, we've gone through an actual certification with that particular Green Trip certifying program.
But we do have AHSC funded projects, and we've even gone so far as, buying an extra bus for the transit system in order to help qualify the project.
I mean, the development in Sacramento that we profiled very, very quickly is a kitty corner to a light rail station, and is a project that is located such that we will be leveraging ASIC dollars that will be invested on the transit side, will be invested into purchasing a new train car for that system, that rail system, and will be invested into mobility improvement, neighborhood mobility improvements, bike and ped mobility improvements in the Broadway neighborhood. So, real important. The linkage between transit and housing is key. And again, Sebastopol, there may be some creative things that Sebastopol can take a look at to help leverage that connectivity, that synchronicity in a more impactful way. I'd love to carry that conversation forward with the commission.
Well, and frankly, Scott, this is an issue for any rural town that doesn't have a major transit line on it.
Yeah.
This isn't specifically to Sebastopol. I grew up in a town in the middle of Minnesota about the same size, and it had the same issue.
Yep. That's right.
Got a couple questions. So I had the same question regarding the parking and the traffic. Thank you for covering that. With respect to having a project being able to be streamlined, how does the design of the project kind of fit into that? And then a question to both Carrie and both of you as well is, where is Sebastopol? Like, what is our gap in order to do that? What do we need? Is it possible? I'm just curious as to, like, is there a sample that we can look at, or Carrie, maybe you're familiar with, what an example of that streamlined process would work from the standpoint.
Go ahead, Carrie.
I was going to actually ask you to, I know of a couple of processes. One is there are certainly new CEQA exemptions. I know Scott spoke about that a bit for infill projects. I'm the environmental coordinator for the city, and I can certainly look at those. I do feel the responsibility to look at, are there specific circumstances with a particular project site-wise where it would work or not work. But that's an option. And then I believe last year around this time you heard about SB 35, which is a streamlined process. The city does currently have an applicant who has submitted a notice of intent. I can't talk about that particular application to go through that process. And unfortunately, part of that is probably because the design of the project was problematic.
Okay. Yeah. Chairman Fernandez, I would say we do have some example, streamlining templates that we can provide. Sacramento is right at the top of my list, and we're happy to provide those. One of the tools that we see local jurisdictions adopting in a real proactive, intentional way, and I think Sebastopol has a downtown specific plan that's been adopted. Yes? Is there a specific plan adopted?
We do not. We have a PDA, a priority development area that covers downtown.
So from a streamlining standpoint, if a lot of municipalities are intentionally adopting, specific plans and certifying those specific plans through EIR findings, and the ability to piggyback off of that EIR is one of the tools that is both rewarded by the state in terms of the financing stack, and helps to condense, right, what might otherwise be a lengthy project-specific CEQA certification. If you can piggyback off of a specific plan that's been adopted, EIR certified, that's a real impactful, powerful planning tool.
And the designs of the projects, how are they determined as they go through design review, or is that something that's preset?
It's going to vary by jurisdiction. In Sacramento, that fairly largely scaled 140 unit mixed use project did not have to go through design review. That was 100% staff level approval. We met the affordability criteria. We met the number of units criteria, and it was all processed at staff level. No design review. Now that gets into, that comes with some complications and sensitivity, as we all know, in terms of public participation and engagement. And we're not suggesting that that necessarily be taken away and that the public be disempowered, but just from a housing production standpoint, streamlining policy is really impactful.
Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and open up for public comments since they've been waiting patiently, and then we can bring it back and Commissioner has additional questions. And for the public, if the way this will work is you'll have 3 minutes. If you have questions, we can't engage in dialogue, but you can ask your question, make your comment. We'll write down the questions that you have, and then after the end of public comment, we'll do our best to answer those questions. So if you would like to have questions, go ahead and virtually or literally raise your hand, and Carrie will spot you and put you in.
Yeah, and I know Michael had a couple of questions earlier in the chat. That is, we did want to say that questions for the question and answer format, since this is a planning commission meeting. But so Michael, I don't know if you had any additional questions you wanted to ask. Okay, I guess not. He did have a couple of questions that Marianne caught, so thank you for that.
Yeah, I would just like to say, the two big things that would really help California in affordable housing production would be an increase in our tax credit allocation from the federal government, as well as the reduction of this 50% test to 25% for tax exempt bond projects. Currently, in order to qualify as a tax exempt project, you have to use more than 50% of the financing has to come from the bonds. And a lot of times, the project can't permanently support that amount of financing. So, you take it out, use it during construction, and then, it gets paid down with soft loans or, a small mortgage. But if we didn't have to use that 51% or more, we would be able to do more tax exempt bond deals. And I can't remember what the number is, but it would be significant to allow projects to go through. So we're hoping that it will be incorporated in Biden's housing as infrastructure, the infrastructure bill that's going to be proposed.
Carrie, do you see any other individuals wanting to make public comment?
I do not see any additional public comment or questions. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. We'll go ahead and bring it back to commission and just see if anybody has any additional comments or questions. Feel free to go ahead and speak up. Yes. We'll start with our planning director.
Thank you. I guess I could have probably asked the question in public.
Sure. Absolutely.
After all, I do live in Sebastopol. Do you have, I know you talked a lot about economies of scale, but I'm curious if you have any thoughts or recommendations for the smaller projects. And, as both the planning director and a member of the public, it's nice to see that, one of the things I love about the area, West County and Sebastopol, is there's all these tucked in little places, and it's not this big block of apartments. That's not, that's a little hard to reconcile with the character of town, but to have these little communities, and we have, like our last presentation was on co-housing and 2 Acre Woods and Sequoia Village and those types of things, which are bigger, but they're still sort of tucked away. And not to say that I'm trying to hide housing, but it's more that it's the character, that it's not, a huge scale. It's there's smaller communities. And so I'm curious if you have any advice for especially since the funding that I mentioned earlier is more likely to happen for the smaller scale, 10 unit kind of projects.
If you could bundle several projects together, and if you wanted to use tax credits or other state financing, that would work. If they're within, I think it's 10 miles or within the same county, even you could do tax credits. A lot of times, like when I was at Burbank, I did rehab of 2 communities that were across the street from each other, but one was only, 28 units. And there's no way I would have ever gotten an investor to take a 28 unit project. So I married it with a 90 unit one. They weren't in the same partnership, but we did them at the same time. So, the investor had some economies of scale that way.
Okay. And I know that Sebastopol actually, because of our population, we actually qualify for the rural set aside. Is that helpful or change any of those dynamics?
It does allow you to compete in a separate pool that, it's in some respects a little easier.
It used to be a lot easier, and it's become much more competitive now, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But Marianne is right. It is a separate pool.
Do you ever do projects where you partner with a for-profit developer and have like a mixed income project kind of thing where you can leverage some of their funds for your project? Or
Yes, absolutely. Yes, the answer is yes, we do. Typically, often that takes the form of EAH taking on the market rate master developers inclusionary housing obligation. And we partner with market rate developers in that regards. We have a large transit-oriented development at a Santa Clara County VTA, the transit agency in Santa Clara County, is making their surface parking lot available for a large-scale mixed use, mixed income development where we're taking on as the inclusionary component of that master plan, developing a 90-unit, four-story 90-unit affordable housing component to that overall master plan. So yes, we do. That is one of the avenues that we seek out and welcome the opportunity to proceed on.
I have a comment or question when.
Yes.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to remind us of our time, not time in this meeting, but that at the time frame of us building affordable housing. And if you'll recall, we did Hollyhock down on South Gravenstein, and that was in cooperation, Burbank, of course, and the USDA Rural Development. I don't know if those funds are still available, but I just wanted to remind us. And that was like in, I think it finally got finished 2013 or 14. So little by little. So it's not a question, just reminding us of our good work.
Here, here. Yes, Hollyhock is a great for sale home ownership, first time home buyer subdivision. EAH, we're not in that space. Our space is affordable rental. But yes, that subdivision, the funds of USDA, that was financed mostly through USDA what's called 502 home mortgage funds, in combination with the state HCD funds that used to be available that are no longer available. The state has made a real commitment to affordable rental. So it becomes more difficult for the affordable housing network to really finance home ownership for sale subdivisions like Burbank was moving forward in the past, that I used to do a lot of work with, actually.
That's too bad. I didn't realize that. So.
Yeah, it takes a lot of down payment assistance in order to get the home down to a level that's affordable for the home buyers.
But you're right, that's a great community. Yeah.
You have other comments or questions, Linda?
Oh, no, that was
Okay.
it.
All right. Is there anybody else? I think we're kind of.
I actually have one last question. Sure. So how does EAH work with, when you come to a community and there's going to be some resistance for whatever reason, there's always some kind of community resistance, it seems, where you do have to go through some kind of public hearing process. It's not a ministerial approval. Like, how does EAH kind of work with making sure that the community, does support a project and can rally behind, even if there are, there's always going to be the few naysayers, but how do you have some kind of proactive outreach mechanism that you guys work with to make sure the community buys into the project?
Yes, the answer is yes. We welcome community engagement. We welcome the input, the feedback provided through the public participation process that we launch and that we engage in. We seek that out. That's an important component of the community building work that we do. And, you know, we try to be respectful, responsive. We try to listen, take into account the concerns, the fears that that are expressed. We will always try to, you know, come forward with design or programmatic solutions that help to mitigate those concerns. And so, yes, we're very accustomed to engaging directly, even if it's you know, even in those instances where we're not obligated to seek out and engage through a formal process. We will intentionally and voluntarily do that. So that's an important piece. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, great question. It definitely needed to be asked. So yeah, that's great. Well, Scott, Marianne, really appreciate your time here. And Scott, I'm glad you're one of us, Sebastopolians. Hopefully we can help us out here. Try to be creative with you know, some opportunities that may come along. But I think it's just the start is just to identify maybe some areas and get us pointed in the right direction. And you know, it's got to start somewhere. Thinking about it anyway, possibility. So really appreciate your time, spending the time with us tonight.
Great.
Appreciate the interest in the invite. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks so much.
Great. Thank you.
All right.
And just for informational purposes, our next meeting on April 27th, we will have Burbank Housing as a presenter. And, you know, that name came up a few times, and they will be talking about working with faith-based organizations. So timely for that. And then on May 11th, we have a Mid-Penn Housing. They were developed for the teacher housing project in San Francisco Sunset District. And then on May 25th, we'll have, I don't know if it's pronounced Eden or Eden Housing.
Eden, yeah.
Eden, an affordable housing developer and operator based in Hayward. They have partnered with cities throughout the Bay Area, including communities in Hillsburg, Petaluma, and Marin to do presentations. So we just continue to try to think outside the box and hear what other people are doing and hopefully make some things work. So thank you for that.
That's wonderful.
That's great. Those are all value add members of the Allied Affordable Housing Network.
Yeah,
That's
and
great.
I want to thank former Commissioner Kate Haug for setting all these up. So that's great.